Let's make a chocolate cake. Hi, I'm Rosemary, and you're watching Season Living. In today's episode, I'm going to show you how to make a cake that turns out just like a box cake, but it's made from scratch. All right, I'm going to show you how to get your flour measured correctly so that when you use all-purpose flour for a cake mix, that you get a nice light fluffy cake. So what I do is I just pre-sift it into a larger bowl. To what I think is approximately 2 cups worth. And then I measure out we need 2 cups. And by doing it this way, you've lightened up the flour, you've kind of separated it, so you're not using as much flour as you would if you just took the 2 cups right out of your regular flour jar. So it helps to do that pre-sifting. Now, to make a parchment paper round for your cake pan, you need some parchment paper, and then all you need to do is set your pan on top of the parchment paper, take a pencil, and draw around the bottom of your cake pan. You'll have a circle, and take some clean kitchen shears and go ahead and cut that circle out. What I do is I stay just on the edge of the pencil line so that you're not getting that touching your cake. So I basically trim that off. And there, that should fit the inside of your pan. Now I've preheated the oven to 350, and the ingredients we're going to start with are a stick of butter, which would be unsalted butter. Then we're going to add 1.5 cups of white sugar, and 1/2 cup of a light brown sugar. And we're going to let that mix. If you have to scrape down the bowl, go ahead. I've got some butter stuck on the sides and I want it to get incorporated with the sugar really well. Now we're going to add 1/2 cup of oil. I'm just using a mixed organic. It's a mix of like coconut oil, olive oil, I think it's safflower oil. It's just kind of a blended, and it's much lighter and nicer for doing baking with. So we needed 1/2 cup of oil. Then we need 1/2 cup of milk. I'm just using a 2%. Now we need 1/2 cup of sour cream. Now we're going to add 3 eggs, if you can. And these are 3 large eggs. Then we're going to add 1 teaspoon of salt, 1/2 teaspoon of baking powder, and 2 teaspoons of baking soda. Then we're going to add 1 tablespoon of vanilla. We're going to add 1 cup of cocoa. I'm just using an organic cocoa, dry cocoa. You could use Dutch cocoa, but Now in between, just kind of scrape down because some of that dry ingredients is going to stick to the sides. And I've even got some on my beater. So I'm going to scrape that off. And now we're going to be adding 2 cups of all-purpose flour. Now at this point we have one more ingredient to add, and it is 1 cup of hot water. You don't have to have it boiling, but have it fairly warm. And this is just going to make all of those ingredients come together and kind of melt them so that they blend and taste really well. And once again, go ahead and scrape your sides down. Make sure everything is incorporated. Okay, so at this point you're going to notice that it's a little bit runnier or thinner than your normal homemade cake mix. This is going to get it to taste and feel and look like a box cake mix. So let's just give it another whirl. So now we're just going to butter the sides. I'm going to take one of our parchment papers and set it in the bottom. And that little bit of butter will help hold that in place. Let's do it to the other one. Little on the bottom. Then I'm going to go that extra step and I'm going to butter lightly the parchment paper also. Just a little bit. You don't need a lot. About that quick. Then we're going to put some flour on here. So I'm going to put some flour in the pan. And you're just going to kind of tap it all around and make sure you're getting it on the sides so that, just kind of turn your pan and let the flour kind of just slide around the edges of your pan. If you get a little on the counter, it's okay. We can wipe it up later. I'm going to put the excess in here. Give it a little tap. You don't want too much flour left over. There, that's the way it should look. We're going to add just a little more here. There we go. All right, let's scrape that beater off. Now we want to make sure that we just have it even in both of our pans. And what I do with that is just use like a measuring cup that I can use as a scoop. And I just kind of go back and forth between the two of them. Put one in and one. And then this. And then I come back. And we're just going to scrape down the bowl and try to finish. Kind of smooth it out a little bit. And something I like to do to remove any kind of air bubbles that might be in from the mixing before we put it in the oven is just give it a light drop. Don't, just about maybe 1 inch off the counter. And what that does is help bring up any kind of air bubbles. Now into the oven for approximately 40 minutes. Keep an eye on it, depending on how your oven works, but it's right around 40 minutes. Now while the cake is finishing up in the oven, let's go ahead and make the frosting. And we're going to make chocolate frosting for our chocolate cake. We're going to need 3 sticks of butter. And we want to cream this really well until it's really fluffy. All right, now we're going to add 3/4 of a teaspoon of salt. We're going to add 1½ teaspoons of vanilla. We're going to add a 1/2 cup of cocoa, powdered cocoa. And then we're going to add anywhere from 1 to 1½ bags of powdered sugar, depending on how thick you want your frosting to be. So that would be approximately 6 cups of powdered sugar. Just add a little bit at a time. And now we're going to add 3 tablespoons of cream, like a whipping cream. I suppose you could use a 1/2 and 1/2 also. And then continue to add your powdered sugar. So let's stop and scrape it down. And at this point, it's a good time to go, is it thick enough? Or do I want it thicker? I think we'll add just a little bit more. Like I said, it's your preference on how thick or thin you want your frosting. All right, we're going to scrape it down one more time, just to make sure all that butter is incorporated and the powdered sugar doesn't have any lumps in it. All right. Scrape off our beater. All right, now our cakes are cooled and we're going to remove them from the pans. So I'm going to just take a regular butter knife and kind of run it around the outside edge. Remember, we have the parchment paper on the bottom, so it shouldn't be too difficult to remove. So I'm going to take my cake stand that I'm going to use, and I'm going to turn it upside down, flip it, try to make sure it's lined up pretty close around the edge. And there we go. We have a little bit of crumbling, but that's okay. We'll just pull that off. And we're going to gently take our parchment paper off. All right, what I'm going to do right now is just kind of take this little pastry brush. I'm just going to kind of get these crumbs that have kind of falling off the cake here. And I'm just going to kind of clean up the sides a little bit. And the next thing I'm going to do, I have a few of these little squares of parchment paper that I've cut. And what I'm going to do is just gently lift the cake and tuck it under just a little bit. And I'm going to kind of do that all the way around. And what this is going to do is keep the cake, when I frost it, it'll keep the sides of the cake stand clean. So we will pull them off after it's frosted. All right, so here's our frosting that we made earlier. And it's kind of, I would say it's a milk chocolate frosting. If you wanted your frosting of a richer chocolate flavor, just go ahead and add more cocoa as you're mixing it and just kind of taste it as you go along till it gets to the way you want it. But I like the milk chocolate. So we're going to add some frosting and we're going to spread it around. And now we're going to take our other cake and we're going to flip it as quickly as we can. And now we can kind of gently slide it. All right, this is kind of crumbly. We'll take off the parchment paper. We'll clean up the crumbs here a little bit. And now we're going to put frosting on the top of the cake. All right, now I'm going to start adding to the sides. All right, now we're going to just pull those little pieces of paper out very gently because you don't want to pull the bottom of the cake off. Just kind of gently pull them. Now let's go ahead and cut a slice to see what it looks like all put together. And there you have it. Easy chocolate cake. Just as good as a box mix, but you made it yourself from scratch. So I hope you enjoyed being here today as we made this cake. And until next time, enjoy your season.